Close your eyes and take a deep breath. You are home now, and the world outside can wait. Welcome to another episode of Z in History. An old king decided to divide his kingdom based on which daughter loved him most. The two who gave him pretty speeches took everything. The one who told him the truth was cast out. This is the story of King Lear, a man who learned too late that the people who flatter you are not always the people who love you. The crown does not protect you from the consequences of your own choices. The fire is warm and the storm is still far away. Settle in and let the story of the old king unfold. Chapter 1. The Love Test. King Lear was old and tired, and he had made a decision. He would divide his kingdom among his 3 daughters. He wanted to spend his remaining years free from the burden of rule. He called them before the court. He asked them to tell him how much they loved him. The one who loved him most, he said, would receive the largest share. Goneril, the eldest, spoke first. She told her father that she loved him more than words could say, more than life itself, more than anything in the world. It was a beautiful speech, full of warmth and devotion. Lear smiled and gave her a third of his kingdom. Regan, the middle daughter, spoke next. She said that her love was even greater than her sister's. She said that she had no joy in life except her father's love. Lear smiled again and gave her another third. Then Cordelia, the youngest, stepped forward. She told her father that she loved him as a daughter should love a father, no more, no less. She said that she would save half of her love for the husband she would one day marry, because that was the natural order of things. Lear was furious. He had expected a speech. He had wanted to be flattered. He disowned Cordelia on the spot. He divided her share between her 2 sisters. The court watched in silence. Kent, one of Lear's oldest and most loyal advisers, tried to reason with him. Lear banished Kent for speaking the truth. The door closed behind Cordelia. The king was left with the 2 daughters who had told him exactly what he wanted to hear. Chapter 2. The Fool and the Truth. Lear moved into Goneril's castle with 100 knights. He expected to be treated with the honor that a retired king deserved. The first few weeks were fine. The meals were good. The rooms were warm. The servants were attentive. But the cracks began to show quickly. Goneril told Lear that his knights were too loud and too rough. She wanted him to send half of them away. It was a small request, she said. A reasonable one. Lear felt the insult like a slap in the face. He argued with her. She did not back down. She had the power now. The land was hers. Lear's fool was the only one who told him the truth. The fool followed him around the castle, singing songs and making jokes that were not really jokes. He told the king that he had been a fool to give away his crown. He said Lear had trusted the wrong daughters. He said Lear had thrown away the only one who truly loved him. Lear laughed at the fool's jokes, but the laughter was hollow. The fool was right, and Lear knew it. He packed his things and left for Regan's castle. He expected a warmer welcome. The road was long and the weather was turning cold. Lear felt something he had not felt in years. Uncertainty. Chapter 3. The Door That Closed. Goneril sent a messenger ahead to warn Regan that their father was coming. The 2 sisters had talked to each other and agreed on a strategy. They would present a united front. They would not let an old man play them against each other. Regan met Lear at the gate of her castle. She told him that she could not take him in. She said that his knights were a problem. She said he should return to Goneril and apologize. Lear could not believe what he was hearing. He begged her to reconsider. He told her that she had promised to love him more than anything. She said that promises made in public were not always meant to be kept. The door closed in Lear's face. He stood outside in the cold. His knights looked at him. His fool stood silently beside him, and he understood that he had made a terrible mistake. He had given everything to the wrong people. He had nothing left to offer the only daughter who had told him the truth. The storm was coming. He could feel it in the air. He walked away from the castle with no destination in mind. The first drops of rain began to fall. Chapter 4. The Second Door. Lear walked through the countryside with the rain soaking through his clothes and the wind cutting through his bones. He was no longer a king. He was an old man in wet clothes. He was talking to himself and shaking with cold. He found a small hut on the heath and crawled inside. He was grateful for the shelter, even though the roof leaked and the floor was mud. He thought about Cordelia. He thought about the way he had treated her, the way he had shouted at her in front of the whole court, the way he had thrown her out of his life because she would not lie to him. He understood now that she had been the only honest one. She had loved him as a daughter should. He had been too proud to see it. His mind began to slip. The cold and the hunger and the exhaustion were working together. They pulled him away from the world of practical things. He entered a place where the lines between real and imagined began to blur. He started to see faces in the rain and hear voices in the wind. He talked to the storm as if it were a person. He blamed it for everything that had happened. He demanded that it punish the daughters who had betrayed him. The fool found him in the hut and sat beside him. He tried to keep him warm. The fool had no jokes left. He just sat there in the dark, waiting for the rain to stop. Chapter 5. The Storm on the Heath. The storm grew worse. Thunder rolled across the sky. Lightning lit up the heath in flashes of white. Lear walked through it all with his arms outstretched. He shouted at the heavens. He was mad now. The grief and the cold and the betrayal had finally broken something in his mind that could not be fixed. He met a man on the heath, a beggar in rags who called himself Poor Tom. The beggar was actually Edgar. He was the legitimate son of Gloucester. His bastard brother Edmund had framed him. Edgar had been forced to flee for his life. He was dressed as a madman to avoid recognition. Lear looked at him and saw himself. To men who had lost everything. Two men who had been betrayed by the people they trusted. Lear started to understand things he had never understood before. He looked at the beggar's bare feet and thin clothes. He realized that he had never known what poverty really was. He had been a king his whole life. He had never been cold or hungry. He had never been afraid of where the next meal would come from. He was learning now. The lesson was brutal. The storm raged on. The night stretched long and dark. The old king who had once ruled Britain was huddled in a hut with a fool and a madman. He waited for the morning that might never come. Chapter 6. The Gloucester. Gloucester had been watching the events unfold with growing horror. He was one of Lear's oldest friends. He was a nobleman who had served the king faithfully for decades. When he saw how Lear was being treated by his own daughters, he made a decision. He would help the king escape to Dover. Cordelia had landed there with a French army to rescue her father, but Edmund, Gloucester's bastard son, had other plans. He had been working with Goneril and Regan from the beginning. He fed them information and positioned himself for power. He told Regan and Cornwall that his father was helping the enemy. It was a betrayal that would cost Gloucester everything. Gloucester was arrested in his own castle. Cornwall, Regan's husband, ordered him bound to a chair. The old man who had tried to do the right thing was about to pay for his loyalty in the most brutal way imaginable. Edmund stood in the corner and watched. His face was expressionless. He had made his choice. He was not going back on it now. Chapter 7. The Meeting in the Rain. Gloucester was blinded by Cornwall and Regan. Cornwall dug his thumbs into the old man's eyes and crushed them. He left Gloucester in darkness that would never lift. A servant tried to stop the torture and was killed for his trouble. But the servant's sacrifice was not entirely in vain. In the chaos, Gloucester was able to escape. He stumbled through the countryside, blind and bleeding. He was guided by an old man who had been his tenant for years. He asked to be led to the cliffs of Dover. He wanted to end his life. He could not bear to live in a world where loyalty meant nothing and betrayal was rewarded. On the way, he met Edgar, still disguised as poor Tom. Edgar did not reveal himself. He could not yet. He took his father's arm and guided him toward Dover. He pretended to be a mad beggar who had found a purpose. The blind man and the disguised son walked together through the rain. Each carried a burden that the other could not see. Chapter 8. The Rescue Plan. Cordelia had landed at Dover with a French army. Her only goal was to find her father and bring him to safety. She sent soldiers out to search the countryside. They were looking for an old man in wet clothes who might not even remember his own name anymore. They found him wandering near the coast. He was wearing a crown of weeds and singing to himself. He did not recognize them at first. He thought they were spirits sent to torment him. They treated him gently. They wrapped him in warm blankets and carried him to Cordelia's camp. He slept for the first time in days. It was a deep and dreamless sleep that finally gave his mind a rest. When he awoke, Cordelia was sitting beside him. He looked at her face and started to cry. He asked her if she was a spirit sent to test him. She told him she was his daughter. She told him she loved him. She said she had come to take him home. He fell to his knees and begged her forgiveness. She lifted him up and held him. She told him that there was nothing to forgive. For a brief moment, the world was right again. Chapter 9. The Blinding. Gloucester reached the cliffs of Dover, or so he thought. Edgar had led him to a flat field. He told him he was standing at the edge of the cliff. Gloucester knelt down, said a prayer, and threw himself forward. He landed flat on the ground, unharmed. Edgar had tricked him to save his life. Gloucester sat up, confused. He thought he had survived a fall that should have killed him. Edgar, still in his disguise, told him that the gods had spared him for a reason. Gloucester accepted the explanation. He wanted to believe that there was still meaning in the world. He wanted to believe his suffering had not been pointless. Edgar led him away from the field. He still pretended to be a beggar. He still hid his identity from the father who had been tricked into hating him. The two of them moved through the countryside. They avoided soldiers and stayed off the main roads. They waited for the battle that would decide everything. Chapter 10. The Reunion. The English army marched toward Dover to meet the French. Goneril and Regan were there, along with Edmund and Cornwall. The forces gathered on the battlefield. The tension was thick enough to cut. But before the fighting started, something remarkable happened. Lear and Cordelia were reunited. Lear was dressed in clean clothes. His mind was clearer than it had been in weeks. He looked at Cordelia and saw his daughter, not a spirit, not a vision. He held her hands. He told her that he had been wrong. He had been blind. He had treated her worse than a stranger would have treated an enemy. She told him that she had never stopped loving him. She said she had always known that he would come back to himself. They sat together and talked about the past and the future and the small things that had been lost in the storm. It was a moment of peace in the middle of a war. Both of them knew that it might not last. The battle was coming. The outcome was uncertain. Chapter 11. The Battle. The English army defeated the French forces. Cordelia's soldiers fought bravely, but they were outnumbered and outmaneuvered. Cordelia and Lear were captured. They were taken to the English camp under guard. Edmund gave the order. He told the captain who was guarding them to take Cordelia to the prison and hang her. Then he told him to make it look like suicide. Lear did not know what had been ordered. He walked to the prison with Cordelia beside him. He held her hand. He talked about the life they would build together in a small cell with nothing but each other. He was almost happy. He had his daughter back. Nothing else mattered. The battle ended and the victors gathered to divide the spoils. But the victors were not united. Goneril and Regan were both in love with Edmund. The rivalry between them was turning poisonous. The alliance that had defeated Lear was starting to tear itself apart from the inside. Chapter 12. The Weight of the Crown. The truth about Edmund's betrayal came out. Edgar revealed himself and challenged his brother to a duel. They fought and Edmund fell, wounded and dying. Before he died, he confessed to everything. The plot against Gloucester, the betrayal of Lear, the order to have Cordelia killed. Lear found Cordelia hanging in her cell. He carried her body out into the open air. He held her in his arms. He cried out in a voice that broke everyone who heard it. He told her to stay with him, to open her eyes, to say one more word. She did not move. She was gone. Lear's heart could not take it. He stood over his daughter's body with tears streaming down his face. Then he fell beside her. He was dead from grief. Kent knelt beside the bodies of the king and the princess. He asked why the world allowed such things to happen. Edgar stood in silence. The new weight of leadership was settling on his shoulders. The kingdom was left in ruins. The old king was dead. The good daughter was dead. The evil ones had destroyed each other in their greed. The crown passed to Edgar. He carried it with the knowledge that the cost of power was higher than anyone was willing to pay.